That's not a question of doing Israel's dirty work. We've already fought with Israel years. The question is, if you decide that you are going non-violence, you cannot really let violence be a free option for anybody to choose. And that is not really the case with us only. Look at the Syrians, they have their land occupied, and have they decided that they will choose when to go into battle and not. And therefore, there is a total control that allows absolutely no violence through the Syrian border. The same is done by Hezbollah today in Lebanon. The same is done by Hamas, by the Egyptians, the Jordanian. If you don't want to go to war, you cannot allow people to choose when to go to war themselves. It's just a question of maintaining total non-violence, so long that that is the policy.
Well, no, it isn't just a question of non-violence. It's politics, isn't it? You are working with the Israelis and the Americans to ensure that you stamp upon Hamas's presence in the West Bank and do what you can to erode Hamas's control in Gaza. And to that extent, you are working alongside the Israelis and indeed supporting an agenda that is shared by the Israelis.
Well, that's precisely what Hamas is saying. And I don't think that is really correct in any way.
It's not just Hamas. It's not just Hamas, Mr. Sha'ath. I mean, I can give you a raft of other people. Nahum Barnea, the respected Israeli journalist, reports being in a meeting in 2008 when a Palestinian military intelligence chief said, quote, "We are taking care of every Hamas institution in accordance with your, i.e. Israel's, instructions." We've got Palestinian human rights groups who have a list of practices, abuses used by these Palestinian so-called Dayton forces against Hamas political operatives.
There are no Dayton forces. There are Palestinian forces that have been trained by British, Americans, Egyptians and Jordanians. And this training have created a capable security organization that was able to stop and stunt violence. That is it and nothing else. And with all respect to Mr. Barnea or whatever Israeli journalist quoting an Israeli Mossad agent does not really count in the final calculation.
Actually, he was at a meeting of Israeli and Palestinian military intelligence chiefs, and he was actually quoting a Palestinian military intelligence chief who was working to your Palestinian Authority.
He was quoting, and I don't trust who is quoting whom. This is not really a court of law. What is really essential is what's the net result. We can end the agreement with Israel tomorrow. We can stop at our will the coordination with Israel. In fact, that's precisely what President Abbas is saying. Come September, we will end all agreements with Israel, and there will be a free fall for anybody who wants to conduct violence against the Israelis.
Really?
But until we get to that point,
is that what you believe is?
If we fail.
Is that the right thing to do? I mean, from your own point of view, you seem to be saying to me we have to work with the Israelis and the Americans to keep a lid on violent elements within our own society. And you're now saying to me that when you issue this unilateral declaration of statehood, but maybe dissolve the Palestinian Authority at the very same time, you're quite happy to see Hamas militants and any other man of violence in Palestinian areas just go and do his business, are you?
You are mixing things up, Mr. Stephen. There is a difference between declaring the state, which is already declared last November 1988, and all of those countries that recognize Palestine today are recognizing a statement that was made in 1988. We don't need to recognize a new state. What Mr. Abbas is saying, come September, if we have not been able to achieve anything from our efforts, and if the Israelis do not withdraw and free settlements, and if all the negotiations fail, then I will resign, the authority will be dissolved, there will be no state, we will get the occupation to take over, we will be not responsible for security, and we will not be responsible for management of the West Bank and Gaza. That is what President Abbas is saying, and that's what I repeated to you. You are mixing this up with declaring the state. If we really come in September and the state is a reality and there is a declared state, no, we will maintain non-violence and we will maintain security for everybody, Palestinian and Israeli.
But there obviously will not be a full-fledged, meaningful state. There might be what the Israelis have rather contemptuously called a Facebook state, where you've got lots of people who say that they like the idea, but the tangible reality is missing because, of course, it will have been declared without any cooperation with Israel. And as we've discussed, the Israelis will still, in effect, be in control of occupied territory. So it will be a virtual state. And I just want to, therefore, push you one more time. Will you support Mr. Abbas if at that moment in September he basically walks away, the Palestinian Authority dissolves, and you think that will be the right solution for the Palestinian people, do you?
I don't think this is the right solution. The right solution are for the Israelis to get out of our country, to end the colonization. The right solution is for Britain, the EU, the US, Russia, and the United Nations to once use the Article 7 of the Charter of the United Nations and use real pressure to get the Israelis out. The United Nations, Britain and the United States and Russia have done that in Iraq to the cost of 1 million Iraqis. We want to do it this time without losses, just real pressure to get the Israelis out of our country. That is what the solution is. No other solution will do. All of these other solutions, I called one of them apocalyptic option, because these are not solutions.
No, but nothing. But Mr. Sha'ath, before we end, let's just pay account for a moment to what we hear from Washington. Nothing we hear from the Obama administration suggests they're prepared to put the kind of pressure on Israel to get Israel to move in the kind of direction you're saying they must move in. So why do you believe all of this is going to happen by September?
We're not believing in anything. We're not a forecasting authority, forecasting the weather in September. We're talking about steps we will be taking. And we are talking about options that will become due if some of these steps fail or some of these steps success. We are building institutions to have a state if that state will be available politically and not only through building institutions. We will be struggling to reach a pressure on Israel that might reach a threshold whereby the Israelis will be convinced to go back to serious negotiations. If all of these fail, and if the international community fails to come to our end, then the apocalypse would come. But we will do everything possible so that we don't reach apocalypse, so that we reach an end of occupation, so we reach real peace, so we reach a real negotiated peace that ends the occupation. That's our objective, not apocalypse.
Well,
but apocalypse is always there.
You clearly have thought long and hard about this, and you choose to use the word apocalypse. I'll just quote you Rob Malley, who used to be a US Middle East peace negotiator. He said recently the process is dead, and he said the problem is, on the Palestinian side, there is no successor to Mahmoud Abbas with the required legitimacy or history. After him, the Palestinian movement, tired and broken, will further tear itself apart. Is he right?
No, that's really, I know Mr. Malley, I know he doesn't mean bad, but that I think is what the Israelis will be dreaming of. This Palestinian people never give up. And it always is able to find leaders for the moment who rise to become real leaders like Yasser Arafat and like Abu Mazen and the others. These people have not given up. We have been struggling for 100 years, Stephen, and we have not given up. And we have tried all means, and we don't give up. We belong to this land, and it's ours, and we are going to stay there. And if the Israelis finally find that for their own sake, for their own future, it is better to come to a peaceful settlement, that will be our objective.
Nabil Sha'ath,
if not...
Nabil Sha'ath, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to end there. But thank you very much for joining us from Ramallah.